The morning mist hung heavy over Windsor Castle as Margaret Thompson adjusted her cleaning cart and prepared for another ordinary day. She had worked as a royal housekeeper for 15 years, dusting the same corridors and polishing the same ancient furniture that had witnessed centuries of royal secrets. Nothing ever changed in the castle's routine, and Margaret liked it that way. But today would be different. Princess Anne stood in the great hall, her silver hair catching the early sunlight streaming through the tall windows. She wore her usual practical attire, a navy blazer and sensible shoes, looking every bit the no-nonsense royal she was known to be. In her hand, she held an ornate brass key that seemed to glow with an otherworldly significance. "Mrs. Thompson," Princess Anne called out, her voice echoing in the vast space. "I need you to accompany me to the lower levels today. There's something I must attend to." Margaret felt a flutter of nervousness in her stomach. In all her years of service, she had never been asked to venture into the castle's mysterious underground chambers. The royal family kept those areas strictly off-limits to household staff. Stories circulated among the workers about hidden treasures and secret passages, but Margaret had always dismissed them as fairy tales. They walked through corridors Margaret had never seen before, past portraits of long-dead monarchs whose eyes seemed to follow their movement. The air grew cooler as they descended a narrow stone staircase that spiraled deep into the earth. Ancient torch holders lined the walls, though electric lights had long since replaced the flickering flames. "Your Highness," Margaret ventured quietly, "may I ask what we're looking for?" Princess Anne paused mid-step, her hand gripping the iron banister. For a moment her composed facade cracked, revealing something Margaret had never seen before: uncertainty, perhaps even fear. 27 years ago, my sister-in-law Diana died in that terrible accident in Paris," Princess Anne said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Before her death, she entrusted certain items to the royal vault system, items that were personal to her." They reached a heavy oak door reinforced with iron bands. Princess Anne inserted the brass key into an elaborate lock mechanism. The sound of tumblers falling into place echoed through the stone corridor like thunder. The door swung open to reveal a chamber that took Margaret's breath away. The room stretched much further than she had expected, with high vaulted ceilings supported by ancient stone pillars. Along the walls stood dozens of glass display cases, each containing artifacts that sparkled under the soft lighting. But Princess Anne walked past all of these treasures without a glance. She headed straight for a section in the far corner where several cases stood covered in dark velvet cloths. Margaret followed, her footsteps echoing on the polished stone floor. "Diana was more than just the people's princess," Anne explained as she approached the covered cases. "She was a woman who understood the power of symbols, of jewelry, of the stories that precious objects could tell. When she realized that her marriage was ending, she began making arrangements." Princess Anne pulled away the first velvet cover, revealing a display case that made Margaret gasp aloud. Inside lay a diamond and pearl tiara that seemed to capture and multiply the light in the room. Even Margaret, who knew little about royal jewelry, could tell this was something extraordinary. "The Spencer family tiara," Anne said softly. "Diana wore this on her wedding day, but this isn't the one that's been on display in the Spencer family collection all these years. This is the real one." Margaret's mind reeled. "You mean the one that everyone sees?" "A replica, a very good one, but a replica nonetheless. Diana had it made shortly before her death. She wanted to ensure that her most precious pieces would be safe from certain influences." They moved to the next case. Anne pulled away another cloth to reveal a stunning sapphire and diamond ring surrounded by smaller gems. Margaret recognized it immediately. It was impossible not to. Every person in Britain had seen this ring countless times in photographs and news reports. "The engagement ring," Margaret breathed. "Diana's engagement ring," Anne confirmed. "Or rather, one of them. When William proposed to Catherine, he gave her what he believed to be his mother's ring. But Diana had this one made as well, an exact duplicate. She kept the original here, along with a letter explaining why." Anne pointed to a small envelope lying beside the ring. The cream-colored paper bore Diana's distinctive handwriting, "For my sons, when they are ready to understand." Margaret felt as though she was witnessing something that would change the royal family forever. "Your Highness, why are you showing me this? Why now?" Princess Anne's expression grew grave. "Because 2 days ago, someone attempted to break into this vault. The security system detected the intrusion, but whoever it was knew exactly where to look. They went straight for this section, Diana's section. They knew what was here. The implications hit Margaret like a physical blow. Someone within the royal circle had betrayed these secrets. Someone with inside knowledge had tried to steal Diana's hidden collection. The investigation has revealed something troubling, Anne continued. The person who attempted the break-in had detailed floor plans of the vault system. They bypassed 3 separate security checkpoints using codes that only a handful of people possess. We believe the threat comes from within our own household. Margaret's hands trembled as she processed this information. What do you need me to do? I need someone I can trust completely. Someone who has served this family faithfully for years without seeking personal gain or recognition. I need you to help me move Diana's collection to a more secure location while we investigate the source of this betrayal. They spent the next hour carefully examining each piece in Diana's hidden collection. Besides the tiara and engagement ring, there were necklaces that had belonged to members of royal families across Europe, earrings gifted by foreign dignitaries, and bracelets with such intricate craftsmanship that they seemed to be works of art rather than mere jewelry. But the most shocking discovery came when Princess Anne opened a case that contained not jewelry, but documents, letters, photographs, and what appeared to be legal papers. Margaret caught a glimpse of official seals and signatures before Anne quickly closed the case again. Some secrets are meant to stay buried, Anne said firmly. But others may need to see the light of day if we're to protect what Diana wanted preserved. As they prepared to leave the vault, Margaret noticed something that made her blood run cold. On the stone floor near the entrance, almost hidden in the shadows, lay a single white rose petal, fresh, recently dropped. Your Highness, she whispered, pointing to the petal. Princess Anne's face went pale. White roses had been Diana's favorite flower. Someone had been here recently, and they had left a calling card, a message that they knew about Diana's secret collection and weren't afraid to let the royal family know it. The mystery was deeper than a simple attempted theft. Someone was playing a dangerous game with the royal family's most closely guarded secrets, and Diana's memory had become the center of a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of the British establishment. As they climbed back up the stone staircase, Margaret couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The portraits on the walls seemed more menacing now, and every shadow could hide a threat. The safety and predictability of her ordinary life as a royal housekeeper had vanished in a single morning. Princess Anne locked the oak door behind them, but Margaret knew that no lock could contain the secrets they had uncovered. Diana's hidden trove had been discovered, but the mystery of who was trying to steal it and why was just beginning. The game was afoot, and the stakes couldn't be higher. The memory of the people's princess, the reputation of the royal family, and the safety of everyone involved hung in the balance as they prepared to uncover a conspiracy that had been 27 years in the making. 3 days had passed since Margaret Thompson first descended into the royal vault with Princess Anne. 3 days of sleepless nights, jumping at every sound, and wondering if she had unknowingly stepped into something far more dangerous than a simple theft attempt. The white rose petal haunted her thoughts, its fresh petals a clear message that someone was watching, waiting, and planning their next move. Margaret was polishing silver in the castle's main dining room when Detective Inspector Sarah Collins arrived. The detective was younger than Margaret had expected, perhaps 40, with sharp green eyes that seemed to take in every detail of the ornate surroundings. She wore a simple gray suit that marked her as someone who was all business. Mrs. Thompson, Princess Anne said as she entered the dining room with the detective, Inspector Collins needs to speak with both of us about the security breach. We'll use the blue room for privacy. The blue room was one of the castle's more intimate spaces, decorated in rich navy and gold tones with paintings of pastoral English countryside. Princess Anne closed the heavy doors behind them and activated a small device that Margaret guessed was meant to prevent electronic eavesdropping. Mrs. Thompson, Inspector Collins began, settling into a wingback chair, Princess Anne has explained that you accompanied her to the vault and witnessed the collection in question. I need you to tell me everything you observed, no matter how small or insignificant it might seem. Margaret recounted every detail she could remember, the brass key, the covered cases, the documents she had glimpsed briefly, and especially the white rose petal. Inspector Collins took notes in a small leather notebook, occasionally asking for clarification about specific details. "Now," the detective said, looking directly at Margaret, "Princess Anne tells me you've worked here for 15 years. In that time, have you ever noticed anyone showing unusual interest in the lower levels of the castle? Anyone asking questions about areas they shouldn't know about?" Margaret thought carefully. "There was something about 2 months ago. I was cleaning the corridor near the entrance to the lower levels when I heard footsteps. When I looked, I saw someone in a royal household uniform walking away quickly. It struck me as odd because that area is usually restricted." "Did you recognize the person?" "Not clearly. They had dark hair and were about average height, but they walked like they knew where they were going, not like someone who was lost or exploring." Inspector Collins exchanged a meaningful glance with Princess Anne. "Mrs. Thompson, what I'm about to tell you must not leave this room. The investigation has revealed that the attempted break-in was not a random crime. Someone provided the intruder with detailed information about the vault's layout, security systems, and the specific location of Lady Diana's collection." The detective opened her briefcase and withdrew several photographs. "These are images from the security cameras. The person who attempted the break-in knew exactly how to avoid most of our surveillance, but we caught a few glimpses." Margaret studied the grainy black and white photos. The figure was dressed in dark clothing and wore a ski mask, making identification impossible. But something about their posture, the way they moved, seemed familiar. "There's more," Inspector Collins continued. "We found evidence that this person had been inside the vault before. Fingerprints on surfaces that hadn't been cleaned recently, suggesting multiple visits over several months. Someone has been studying Diana's collection, learning its contents, and planning this theft for quite some time." Princess Anne stood and walked to the room's large window, gazing out at the castle grounds. "Inspector Collins has also discovered something about the white rose petal we found." "It wasn't just any white rose," the detective explained. "The laboratory analysis shows it came from a very specific variety, David Austin's Diana Rose, created in memory of the Princess of Wales. This particular variety is only grown in a few specialized gardens, including one here on the castle grounds." Margaret felt a chill run down her spine. "Someone picked that rose from our own garden and left it as a message." "Exactly. They're telling us they have access to the castle grounds, knowledge of the vault's contents, and a personal connection to Diana's memory. This isn't just about stealing valuable jewelry, it's about making a statement." Inspector Collins turned to a new page in her notebook. "Princess Anne, I need you to provide me with a list of everyone who has access to the lower levels of the castle, everyone who knows about Diana's hidden collection." Anne's expression grew troubled. "That list is very short. Myself, obviously, Prince William, though he's been told very little about the specifics. The Queen's former private secretary, Sir Gerald Whitman, who helped arrange the vault in the first place. And the head of castle security, Commander James Morrison." "What about household staff?" "Until Mrs. Thompson accompanied me 3 days ago, no household staff member had ever been shown Diana's collection. The existence of the vault system is known to some senior staff members, but not its contents." Margaret raised her hand tentatively. "Your Highness, forgive me, but what about Prince Harry? Surely he knows about his mother's jewelry." Princess Anne and Inspector Collins exchanged another look. Anne sighed deeply before answering. "Harry knows that Diana made arrangements for certain items to be preserved, but he doesn't know the specifics of what's in the vault or where it's located. Diana left very specific instructions about when and how her sons should learn about her hidden collection." The detective leaned forward. "Those instructions, are they among the documents you mentioned seeing?" "Yes, Diana wrote detailed letters to both William and Harry to be given to them on specific dates in the future. She also included instructions for other revelations that she wanted made public under certain circumstances." Margaret's curiosity got the better of her. "What kind of revelations?" Princess Anne hesitated before answering. "Diana kept extensive records of conversations, meetings, and incidents during her time as a member of the royal family. She documented things that she felt the public had a right to know about, but only if something happened to her or if the royal family faced a particular type of crisis." The implications were staggering. Diana hadn't just hidden away valuable jewelry. She had created a time capsule of royal secrets that could potentially shake the monarchy to its foundations. Inspector Collins closed her notebook. This changes everything. We're not just dealing with a theft attempt. We're dealing with someone who may be trying to access information that could be used for blackmail, political manipulation, or public embarrassment of the royal family. A soft knock on the door interrupted their conversation. Princess Anne checked her watch before calling out, "Come in." Commander James Morrison entered the room, his military bearing evident in every step. He was a tall man in his 50s with graying hair and the weathered face of someone who had spent years in active service before joining the Royal Protection Detail. "Your Highness," he said with a slight bow, "I have an update on the security review you requested." Inspector Collins studied Morrison carefully. As head of castle security, he would have had access to everything the intruder had known about the vault system. "Commander Morrison," Anne said, "Inspector Collins is leading the investigation into the breach. Please share your findings with all of us." Morrison's expression remained professional, but Margaret noticed his hands were clasped tightly behind his back. "We've completed our review of all security protocols. The intruder bypassed our systems using valid access codes that were scheduled to expire the following week. They knew not only the current codes, but also the exact timing of when new codes would be implemented." "How many people have access to that scheduling information?" Inspector Collins asked. "3 people. Myself, my deputy, Lieutenant Sarah Hayes, and the external security consultant who designed our current system, Dr. Marcus Webb." Princess Anne turned from the window. "Dr. Webb has worked with our family for over a decade. He designed the security systems for several royal residences." "With respect, Your Highness," Inspector Collins said carefully, "length of service doesn't automatically eliminate someone as a suspect. In fact, long-term access often makes someone more valuable to outside parties seeking information." Commander Morrison's jaw tightened slightly. "Dr. Webb's background has been thoroughly vetted. He holds the highest security clearances and has never given us reason to doubt his loyalty." "Nevertheless," the detective continued, "I'll need to interview him, along with Lieutenant Hayes and anyone else with access to the security information." Margaret watched this exchange with growing unease. The royal household was a tight-knit community where people had worked together for years, trusting each other with the family's safety and secrets. The idea that someone among them might be a traitor was almost too terrible to contemplate. "There's something else," Commander Morrison said, his voice lower now. "We found evidence that someone accessed the vault's historical logs. The computer records show that someone reviewed the complete history of what items were placed in storage and when they were added to the collection." Inspector Collins looked up sharply. "When did this access occur?" "Over the past 6 months, but the access was done using legitimate credentials. Whoever did this had authorized access to the system." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The attempted theft hadn't been a sudden crime of opportunity. Someone had been planning this for months, systematically gathering information about Diana's collection while maintaining their cover as a trusted member of the royal household. Princess Anne walked back to her chair and sat down heavily. "Inspector Collins, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Based on what you've learned so far, do you believe this is simply about stealing valuable jewelry, or is there something more sinister at work?" The detective considered her answer carefully. "Your Highness, in my experience, criminals who go to these lengths, who spend months planning, who leave symbolic messages, who target specific collections with historical significance, they're usually motivated by more than money. Someone wants Diana's collection for a reason that goes beyond its monetary value." Margaret felt as though the walls of the Blue Room were closing in around them. What had started as a simple request to help move some jewelry had revealed a conspiracy that reached deep into the royal household and potentially beyond. "What do we do now?" Margaret asked quietly. Inspector Collins stood and gathered her notes. "Now we set a trap. If someone is watching the vault and planning another attempt, we're going to be ready for them. But first, we need to secure Diana's collection and those documents. If someone is willing to risk breaking into Windsor Castle to get them, we need to understand exactly what we're protecting." As they prepared to leave the Blue Room, Margaret couldn't shake the feeling that they were already too late. Somewhere in the castle, or perhaps outside its walls, someone was watching their every move, waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. The mystery had deepened into something far more dangerous than any of them had anticipated. Diana's hidden trove wasn't just a collection of precious jewelry. It was the key to secrets that someone was willing to risk everything to obtain. The trap was set for midnight on a moonless Tuesday. Inspector Collins had positioned her team throughout the castle's lower levels, each officer hidden in shadows and alcoves where they could monitor the approaches to Diana's vault without being detected. Margaret Thompson found herself in the most unlikely position of her life, serving as bait in a royal conspiracy that had already claimed too many victims. She sat alone in the blue room, exactly as Inspector Collins had instructed, pretending to review household schedules while actually waiting for a knock on the door that might reveal the identity of the person who had been hunting Diana's secrets for months. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked away the minutes with agonizing slowness, each sound echoing through the darkened castle like a heartbeat. At 11:47 p.m., the knock finally came. "Mrs. Thompson," the voice was soft, familiar, and completely unexpected. "May I come in?" Margaret's blood ran cold as she recognized the speaker. She had known this person for years, trusted them, considered them a friend. With trembling fingers, she pressed the small button on the device Inspector Collins had given her, the signal that would bring the detective team running. "Of course," Margaret called out, trying to keep her voice steady. "Please come in." Lieutenant Sarah Hayes entered the blue room, still wearing her security uniform, but with an expression Margaret had never seen before. Gone was the professional demeanor and loyal dedication to royal service. Instead, Hayes looked desperate, cornered, and dangerous. "You know, don't you?" Hayes said quietly, closing the door behind her. "I can see it in your face. Inspector Collins has figured it out." Margaret forced herself to remain calm. "I'm not sure what you mean, Lieutenant. Is there something wrong with castle security tonight?" Hayes laughed bitterly. "Don't play games with me, Mrs. Thompson. I know you've been down to the vault. I know you've seen Diana's collection. And I know that Princess Anne has been moving the most important pieces to a secure location." "Why?" Margaret asked, genuinely confused. "Why would you want to steal from Princess Diana's collection? You've served this family faithfully for 8 years. Hayes sat down across from Margaret, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "You don't understand what's at stake here. What Diana hid in that vault isn't just jewelry, it's evidence. Evidence that could destroy people who have spent decades building their reputations and fortunes." The door burst open as Inspector Collins and 2 other officers rushed into the room. Hayes didn't resist as they approached, instead raising her hands in surrender. "Lieutenant Sarah Hayes," Inspector Collins said formally, "you're under arrest for attempted theft and conspiracy. You have the right to remain silent." But Hayes shook her head. "I want to tell you everything. I want you to understand why I did this, because once you know the truth about what Diana discovered, you'll realize I wasn't the real criminal here." Inspector Collins nodded to her officers, who secured Hayes but allowed her to continue speaking. "Start from the beginning. Why Diana's collection? Why now?" Hayes took a deep breath before beginning her story. 3 years ago, my mother was diagnosed with a rare form of cancer. The treatments were experimental and not covered by insurance. I was facing medical bills that would have bankrupted me, and I was desperate. That's when Dr. Marcus Webb approached me. Margaret felt her heart sink. Dr. Webb, the security consultant who had designed the vault's protection systems. Webb told me that he represented certain parties who were interested in acquiring specific items from the royal collection. Not to sell them, he said, but to prevent them from ever being made public. He offered me enough money to cover my mother's treatments and more. Inspector Collins leaned forward. "What did he want you to do?" "Initially, just provide information about security schedules and access codes. Webb said his clients wanted to ensure that certain items remained safely hidden from public view. He made it sound like we were protecting the royal family, not betraying them." "But that changed," the detective prompted. Hayes nodded miserably. 6 months ago, Webb told me that Diana had hidden documents alongside her jewelry. Documents that contained information about financial dealings involving members of the royal family and certain business associates. Information that could cause a scandal if it were ever released. Margaret remembered the legal papers she had glimpsed in the vault, the official seals and signatures that Princess Anne had quickly hidden from view. "Webb's clients weren't interested in the jewelry at all," Hayes continued. "They wanted those documents. They wanted to make sure that whatever Diana had discovered would never see the light of day. Inspector Collins exchanged glances with her officers. Who were Webb's clients? Who was he working for? I never met them directly, but Webb let slip enough information for me to piece some of it together. There's a business consortium that has been involved in property deals with members of the royal family for decades. Diana had apparently discovered evidence that some of these deals involved money laundering and tax evasion on a massive scale. The room fell silent as the implications became clear. Diana hadn't just been collecting jewelry. She had been gathering evidence of financial crimes that reached into the highest levels of British society. The attempted break-in, Inspector Collins said. You were supposed to steal the documents. Hayes shook her head. I was supposed to provide access and information about where they were located. Webb had hired professional thieves to do the actual stealing. But when I saw the security recordings afterward, I realized that the thieves had been sloppy. They'd left evidence, and I knew it was only a matter of time before the investigation led back to me. Margaret found her voice. The white rose petal, was that your message? That was Webb, Hayes said bitterly. He thought he was being clever, showing that he could access the castle grounds any time he wanted. It was his way of pressuring me to help him plan another attempt. Inspector Collins stood and began packing the small room. Where is Dr. Webb now? I don't know. After the failed break-in, he disappeared. I haven't heard from him in 3 days. I think his clients decided he had become a liability. The detective turned to her officers. Issue an immediate warrant for Dr. Marcus Webb. Contact Interpol. If he's fled the country, we need to know where he's gone. Princess Anne appeared in the doorway, having been summoned by the commotion. She looked older than Margaret had ever seen her, as though the weight of the family's secrets was finally becoming too much to bear. Your Highness, Inspector Collins said, I'm afraid the situation is more serious than we initially thought. This isn't just about theft, it's about a deliberate attempt to suppress evidence of financial crimes that may involve members of your family. Anne's face remained impassive, but Margaret could see the pain in her eyes. Inspector Collins, I think it's time for you to see exactly what Diana left behind. All of it. They made their way down to the vault once more, this time with a full police escort. Princess Anne opened the case containing the documents that Margaret had only glimpsed before. Inside were dozens of files, each meticulously organized and labeled in Diana's careful handwriting. Inspector Collins examined the papers with growing amazement. These are property deeds, bank statements, correspondence between royal advisors and offshore investment companies. This is evidence of a systematic scheme to hide royal assets in tax havens. Diana discovered it by accident, Princess Anne explained. She was reviewing financial documents related to her divorce settlement when she noticed patterns that didn't make sense. Being Diana, she investigated further. Margaret looked at the files spread across the table. She was building a case against corruption within the royal financial system. More than that, Anne said quietly. She was preparing to expose the whole thing if anything happened to her. These documents were her insurance policy. Inspector Collins looked up from the papers. Your Highness, some of these transactions involve people who are still alive, still influential. If this evidence were to become public, it would destroy careers, end political relationships, and potentially damage the monarchy's reputation, Anne finished. That's why certain people were willing to hire thieves to steal it. They couldn't risk these secrets coming to light. Hayes, who had been silent during this exchange, finally spoke up. There's something else you need to know. Webb told me that if they couldn't steal the documents, they had another plan. They were going to claim that the documents were forgeries, planted by someone trying to damage the royal family's reputation. The detective closed the file she had been reading. A preemptive strike to discredit the evidence before it could be examined properly. Exactly. They've been preparing a campaign to question the authenticity of Diana's documentation, using experts who are on their payroll to declare the papers false. Princess Anne sank into a nearby chair. 27 years. Diana has been protecting this family for 27 years, even in death, and certain people have been trying to betray that protection for their own profit. Inspector Collins gathered the documents carefully. Your Highness, I recommend that we place these papers in police custody while we investigate the financial crimes they document. The people involved in this conspiracy need to be brought to justice. "What about the jewelry?" Margaret asked. "Diana's actual collection." Anne smiled sadly. The jewelry was never the real treasure. Diana understood that precious stones and metals are just symbols. The real treasure was the truth she preserved for her sons and for history. As they prepared to leave the vault for what would likely be the last time, Margaret reflected on how much her life had changed in just 1 week. She had gone from being a simple housekeeper to a key witness in a case that would reshape how the world viewed the royal family's finances. 6 months later, the investigation had led to arrests across Europe and the recovery of millions of pounds in hidden royal assets. Dr. Marcus Webb was found living under an assumed name in Switzerland and extradited to face charges. Lieutenant Hayes received a suspended sentence in exchange for her cooperation with the investigation. Princess Anne kept her promise to Diana, ensuring that the documents were eventually made available to historians and financial investigators. The scandal that followed was significant but manageable, and the royal family's willingness to cooperate with the investigation actually enhanced their reputation for transparency. Margaret Thompson returned to her normal duties as a royal housekeeper, but with a new understanding of the weight of secrets that the ancient walls of Windsor Castle had contained for so long. Sometimes, late at night, she would pass by the entrance to the lower levels and remember the adventure that had changed her life forever. Diana's true legacy wasn't the jewelry she had hidden away, but the courage she had shown in documenting the truth, even when that truth was dangerous to powerful people. Her hidden trove had protected not just precious stones and metals, but something far more valuable, the integrity of the institution she had served, even when that service came at great personal cost. The mystery of the royal vault had been solved, but the story it revealed was far more complex and meaningful than anyone had imagined. In the end, Diana's greatest gift to her sons and to history wasn't a collection of beautiful jewelry, but a reminder that truth and justice are the most precious treasures of all.